the glass shattered before anyone had time to react. It hit the marble floor of the Hartfield Grand's lobby. A clean, cold crack that cut through the string quartet, through the murmur of 200 guests in evening wear, through the particular kind of hush that only exists in rooms where everyone is pretending not to notice each other. The champagne flute had slipped from a server's tray near the entrance, and for one suspended second, every head topper. Then the doors opened, and Renée Okonkwo walked in. She wore a dark blue coat, the kind you'd find at a good consignment shop in the annex, the kind that looked fine under streetlights but not under crystal chandeliers. Her hair was natural, pulled back simply. She carried a small envelope clutch, and she paused just inside the entrance the way a person does when they've arrived somewhere alone and are taking their bearings. The Hartfield Restoration Gala happened every November. It was the kind of event that appeared on the society pages of Toronto Life before it happened, not after. Because the names on the guest list were the story. The Aldridge-Beaumont Foundation had hosted it for 11 years running. Their name was on the wing of a hospital in Etobicoke. Their name was on a scholarship fund at U of T. Their name was, as far as this city was concerned, synonymous with philanthropy. What this city did not know, what almost no one in that room knew, was that the Aldridge-Beaumont Foundation had been quietly insolvent for going on 2 years, and the woman who had been keeping it alive was the one standing alone near the coat check, handing over her blue coat. Nobody came to greet her. The coat check attendant, a young man with careful eyes, looked at her invitation, and then looked at her, and there was a pause there that lasted just a beat too long. He took the coat without a word. Renée straightened her dress, black, simple, well-fitted, and turned toward the main hall. A woman in a gold gown was already moving toward her, not to welcome her, to intercept. Her name was Constance Aldridge-Beaumont, 61 years old, and she had the particular posture of someone who had spent decades deciding who belonged where. Her husband, Walter Aldridge-Beaumont, was the foundation's public face. Constance was the architecture. She stopped 3 feet from Renée and looked at her the way a building superintendent looks at a package left in the wrong lobby. "Can I help you?" she said. The words were technically polite. The tone was not. Renée smiled. "I'm Renée Okonkwo. I believe I'm at table 7. Table 7. Constance repeated it back slowly, as though checking the math. "And you received your invitation through?" "Through the foundation office," Renée said. 3 weeks ago." Constance's eyes moved briefly over Renée's dress, her shoes, her earrings, small gold hoops, the kind you'd wear to a dinner, not to a gala, not here. And something settled behind her expression. A conclusion. "I'm sure there's simply been a mix-up," Constance said. "Our seating coordinator may have made an error. Let me have someone look into it before you settle in." She lifted one hand, and a young foundation staffer materialized from somewhere to Renée's left. "Would you mind waiting here?" Constance added, already turning away. Renée said, "Of course." She stood near the entrance while the party moved around her. A server offered her a glass of sparkling water, then seemed to think better of it and moved on. 2 women in their 50s passed close enough to make eye contact and then didn't. A man with a foundation lanyard came over, looked at Renée's name on his tablet, looked at her face, and said he'd need to verify with his supervisor. Renée waited. She had a particular stillness about her. Not the stillness of someone who didn't notice. The stillness of someone who noticed everything and had decided, long ago, that their composure was worth more than any room's approval. She was 31 years old. She had an MBA from Rotman. She had spent the last 7 years building a private investment firm called Okonkwo Capital from a studio apartment on Spadina into a firm with 11 employees, 32 active clients, and, as of 18 months ago, a discreet arm's-length agreement to provide bridge financing to the Aldridge-Beaumont Foundation, while they restructured their endowment following a very poor series of decisions by their former investment manager. The agreement was confidential. That had been the foundation's condition. They did not want it known that they needed help. Renée had agreed because discretion was part of how she worked. Standing near the entrance of the Hartfield Grand, while a staffer went to find a supervisor, Renée was beginning to understand what that discretion had cost her. The supervisor arrived. He was a tall man named Owen, whose foundation badge listed him as Director of Guest Relations. He looked at Renée's name, scrolled through something on his tablet, and said, carefully, that he could see the invitation had been issued, but that there had been a clerical matter around the seating, and would she prefer to wait in the adjacent lounge while they sorted it out. "I'd prefer to take my seat," Renée said pleasantly. Owen cleared his throat. "Of course. I just want to ensure everything is correct before you, Owen." Renée said his name gently. "The invitation is valid, the seat is reserved. I'm happy to wait, but I'd like to know how long." He said he'd be back in 10 minutes. He was not back in 10 minutes. 40 minutes after she arrived, Renée Okonkwo was still standing near the coat check. The string quartet had shifted to a livelier piece. The main hall was filling with the specific kind of laughter that happens when the room reaches its third drink. Somewhere near the stage, Walter Aldridge-Beaumont was shaking hands in a way that suggested he had been shaking hands his entire life and found it deeply satisfying. A woman touched Renée's arm. She was younger, late 20s, natural hair, a deep green dress, a foundation lanyard that identified her as events coordinator, Priya. She leaned in close enough that her voice wouldn't carry. "I'm so sorry," she said, and she meant it. I'm not going to pretend this is a clerical issue. Someone flagged your invitation for re-verification. I don't know who called it in. But your seat is at table 7 and I am walking you there right now." Renée looked at her. "Thank you," she said. Priya walked her in. Table 7 was near the front, which Renée had known when she accepted the invitation. She had, in fact, chosen that seat. It was close to the podium, close to the moment, in the evening when the foundation would announce the next phase of their endowment strategy. The moment when Walter would say, publicly, that the foundation was stable and growing. She had wanted to be there for that, not to be acknowledged. She understood the confidentiality agreement, just to witness it. She sat down. There were 3 other people at the table already. An older couple from Hamilton, who funded a literacy program, and a young architect who designed low-income housing and had been awarded a foundation grant that year. They were all mid-conversation and nodded at Renée warmly as she sat. She relaxed slightly. Then Constance appeared. She came with purpose, and she came with her daughter-in-law, a woman named Georgina, who had the particular quality of someone who had learned her social cruelty from watching someone else practice it. Georgina was 34 and wore her hair in a perfect chignon, and had never, as far as anyone in this room could see, doubted herself once. Constance stopped at the edge of table 7. Her voice was low enough that it wouldn't carry to the next table, but loud enough that everyone at this table could hear it perfectly. "I've confirmed," she said to Renée, "that there was an administrative error with your invitation. I'm afraid table 7 is reserved for foundation patrons and accredited partners." She paused. "We'll have a seat arranged for you at the general seating area near the back." The older man from Hamilton set down his fork. Renée looked at Constance. "I'm an accredited partner," she said. "Our records indicate." "I'd like to know what your records indicate," Renée said, still pleasantly. Specifically." Constance smiled in the way people smile when they've already decided they've won. "I'm sure we can discuss it privately, but for now, if you wouldn't mind." "I would mind," Renée said. The table went very still. Georgina leaned in, slightly, her voice dropping to the register of a stage whisper that was designed to be heard. "You don't have to make this difficult. It's just a seating matter. No one's asking you to leave." "Then I'll stay seated," Renée said. Georgina's eyes went flat. "I think you misunderstood. You're at the wrong table." "I'm at table 7, Renée said, "which is the seat listed on my confirmed invitation." Constance set her hand lightly on Renée's shoulder, and that was when it happened. Not a shove, not quite, but not nothing. A pressure, a steering, the kind of physical contact that is calibrated to not look like what it is. A hand on a shoulder, a slight downward push, a turn of the body, a direction. Constance Aldridge-Beaumont put her hand on Renée Okonkwo's shoulder and pressed firmly in the direction of away. The clasp on Renée's gold necklace, a thin chain with a pendant, a gift from her grandmother, caught on the sleeve of Constance's dress as she pulled back. The chain broke. It fell across the white tablecloth and then off the edge, and the pendant hit the marble floor with a small, clear sound. The kind of sound a room hears even when it's not listening. The man from Hamilton stood up. The architect was already reaching down. Renée did not move immediately. She looked at Constance Aldridge-Beaumont, not with fury, not with tears, with a steadiness that was, somehow, worse than either. Then she bent and picked up the pendant herself, closed it in her hand, and straightened. The room nearby had gone quiet in that radius of incident way, where the people closest say nothing. And the people just outside that radius begin to notice that something has happened. Walter Aldridge-Beaumont was crossing the room. He had seen something from the podium, a shift in the room's energy, a cluster of stillness, and he was coming with the professional concern of a man who needed nothing to go wrong tonight. He reached the table and looked from Constance to Renée, and his face arranged itself into its most practiced expression of warmth. "Is everything all right?" "Ask your wife," said the man from Hamilton. Walter looked at Constance. Constance looked at Renée, and Renée, holding the broken pendant in her closed fist, looked at Walter Aldridge-Beaumont with an expression he would not fully understand until the following morning, when his lawyer called. What none of them knew, what Constance had not thought to check, what Owen, the director of guest relations, had not flagged, what Georgina had not considered while perfecting her stage whisper, was that the Hartfield Grand itself had a security system with cameras in every event space, at every entrance, and along every wall, high-definition cameras, the kind that catch the angle of a hand on a shoulder, the way a chain catches on a sleeve, the moment a pendant falls, and Renée's assistant, who had been watching from a small table near the back wall with a glass of sparkling water and a very good view, had been recording on her phones since the moment Priya walked Renée to her seat. The video was 47 seconds long. By the time Renée was in her car heading north, on Avenue Road, it had been seen by 6,000 people. By the time she got home, it was past 20,000. By morning, it was everywhere. The clip did not need context. It was its own context. A woman in an elegant room, a hand on her shoulder, a necklace falling, a floor. The comments did the rest. The Aldridge-Beaumont Foundation's charity donation line received 41 calls the following morning, most of them to cancel recurring donations. A journalist at the Globe called the foundation's communications director for comment. A second journalist had already begun pulling the foundation's public financial disclosures and had noticed specifically a gap in sources that had not been publicly explained. Walter Aldridge-Beaumont called Renée's cell phone at 8:17 a.m. She let it go to voicemail. His message was 3.5 minutes long, and it covered, in order, an apology, an explanation, another apology, a request for discretion, a reference to the confidentiality agreement, an appeal to the working relationship they had built, and a final, quieter apology that sounded more genuine than the others, and was therefore at this point the least useful. Renée listened to it once. Then she called her lawyer. The confidentiality agreement covered Renée's obligation not to disclose the financing arrangement. It did not cover what had happened at Table 7, and it did not, as her lawyer confirmed within the hour, constitute a barrier to Renée exercising her rights as a creditor if the foundation defaulted on the terms of the agreement, which, as of the last quarterly report, they were 2 months from doing anyway. She did not release a statement. She did not appear on camera. She did not respond to the 4 media requests that came in by noon. What she did that afternoon was send a letter, through her lawyer, formally on Okonkwo capital letterhead, to the Aldridge-Beaumont Foundation's board of directors. The letter noted that the financing agreement was entering its review period. The letter noted that Okonkwo Capital would be exercising its right to a full financial audit as a condition of any renewal. The letter noted that, pending the outcome of that audit, the terms of the arrangement would be restructured. The board received the letter at 2 p.m. By 3, they had called an emergency meeting. By 4, 2 board members had retained independent counsel. Constance Aldridge-Beaumont did not attend the board meeting. She was, according to the foundation's communications director who fielded all calls that day, unavailable for comment. Georgina deleted her social media accounts that afternoon. This was noticed. The Globe ran the story the next morning. Foundation under scrutiny following gala incident. 3 paragraphs in, there was a reference to questions around the foundation's financial position. The story did not name Okonkwo Capital. Renée had not spoken to any reporter, but it did note that sources close to the foundation indicated the organization had been reliant on external private financing for nearly 2 years. The foundation's annual gala partner, a hotel group that had co-hosted the event for 6 years, issued a quiet statement that it would be reviewing the partnership going forward. The hospital wing bearing the Aldridge-Beaumont name announced a meeting of its naming committee. Walter Aldridge-Beaumont issued a public apology. It was long and carefully worded and described the incident as a regrettable misunderstanding. The comments on the Globe article were not kind about it. The comment with the most upvotes read, "You can write whatever you want. We saw the video." On a Friday evening, 10 days after the gala, Renée Okonkwo sat at the table by the window of a coffee shop on Bloor Street near her office. She had a flat white and a folder of documents, and she was not on her phone. She was, by any reasonable measure, simply a woman doing work on a Friday evening. Her assistant, Theodora, sat across from her with her own coffee, and at one point looked up and said, "How are you actually doing, Renée?" "Tired," she said. "But fine." Theodora nodded. They both knew fine was load-bearing in the way that word sometimes has to be. "The audit starts Monday," Theodora said. "I know." And the board reached out again. "I saw." Theodora wrapped both hands around her mug. "Do you think they'll restructure the whole thing?" Renée looked out the window at Bloor Street. In the November evening, the streetlights coming on, the particular quality of light that Toronto gets in late fall when the trees are bare, and the city becomes mostly glass and gray and yellow. "I think," she said, "that they're going to need to." She opened the folder. The numbers were what they were. She had known them for months, had arranged and rearranged the timeline of how this would go, had understood that at some point the foundation would either stabilize or it wouldn't. She had not expected this to be the way the rest of the city found out. She had not expected a lot of things about that evening. But she was also, if she was honest with herself, not entirely surprised. She had walked into a room where she was not expected to hold the kind of weight she held. She had been in rooms like that before. She had been in rooms like that her entire career. Rooms that assessed her in the first 10 seconds. And arrived at a conclusion that had nothing to do with what she had built or what she knew or what she was carrying. In that small envelope clutch, along with her confirmed invitation, she had learned to be still in those rooms. She had learned to let the conclusion sit there, wrong and confident, and to simply wait. She was good at waiting. The coffee shop was warm and quiet, and the folder on the table was full of the kind of information that restructures futures. Renée finished her flat white, made 3 notes in the margin of the top document, and closed the folder. Outside, the city moved the way it does on a Friday. Quick, purposeful, headed somewhere. A streetcar went past. Someone's scarf caught in the wind and made them laugh. Renée put on her coat, a new one, charcoal wool, the kind that does not need to apologize for itself in any room, and stepped out into the evening. The pendant was already at a jeweler's being repaired. The chain would be stronger than it was before. That is, in the end, how most things worth keeping are made.